I'm Charles Kochman, editorial director of ComicArts. To my right is Chad Beckerman, our designer, who designs our books with his team, and art director. And to my left is Carol Burrow, who's our senior writer, working on a bunch of our books as well for Abrams ComicArts. And we wanted to sort of walk you through a quick history, and then Mark Evanier, who's doing 32 more panels before the end of the day, is going to jump in, announce one of our projects, and then we'll go back to panels. But I want to just sort of show you quickly who Abrams is. We've been here for 5 years, and in 5 years we've done 50 books. And you know, it's been a great 5 years. We had 2 New York Times bestsellers, we had 2 national bestsellers, 2 Eisner Awards, 18 Eisner nominations, including the article of Goldberg, which was nominated last night, 3 Harvey Awards, 32 Harvey Award nominations. And a lot of this started since I've been at Abrams since 2005. Before Abrams, we had been, you know, that was our logo and our new logo. We've been sort of doing comics-related books and different books about comics and pop culture. We did the Smithsonian book of newspaper comics with Bill Blackbeard. That came out in 1977, and then the other one next to it, the comic books one, came out in 1982. And before, and even before that, 1973, Abrams published the Art of Walt Disney, which was the first real art book on pop culture. And shortly after that, in 1986, we published a book on Crazy Cat with Patrick McDonald. I was at DC Comics and Mad Magazine for 12 years, and I was working on this book, The Golden Age of DC Comics, with Chip Kidd. And we licensed that to Abrams, and during the process of that, Abrams asked if I would be willing to come over to Abrams to sort of launch a pop culture imprint, the comics imprint, or do some pop culture related titles. And the first book that I did, the first book I acquired in 2006 was Mom's Cancer, and that won an Eisner Award and gathered a lot of attention for the kinds of books that we were hoping to do. And it's just a brief overshot of some of the titles we were doing. And we were just sort of, you know, amongst all the other books that Abrams has done for 65 years with photography and the books on Norman Rockwell and everything, we do the occasional book on comics. And after a bit, it just became clear that, you know, we should sort of consolidate all this and create an imprint called ComicArts. And again, thanks to Chip Kidd, we have a wonderful logo. And in the past 5 years, we've done different books that we sort of categorize as, you know, art of books, which are the monographs on different creators. Those are some of the more recent ones. And original graphic novels. These span everything from, you know, nonfiction to fiction, bios, licenses like The Simpsons and Archie, and books that sort of cross over for all ages that are appropriate for kids as well as adults. And we also do a lot of books that are age appropriate for kids directly. J.C. Chica's Meanwhile and Page by Page, and we have a recent book that's coming out which we'll hear a little bit more about called El Defo, which is a graphic novel for kids. Kazu Kibuishi, who should be here, unless he's still on the ferry coming over from the convention. We're doing his Explorer books, and you know him from Flight, you know, from the covers for the Harry Potter books and all that. We've been really thrilled to have his books and Frank Musso's Salem High books, as well as books by Barry Deutsch and Nathan Howe, whose name is really Nathan Howe. And those are our graphic novels, period history pieces. And then we also do books that are collections that sort of look at different aspects of different careers, different kinds of books, different genres. And we work with everybody from Art Spiegelman and Francois Mouly, with Al Jaffe, DC Comics, we license books, Will Eisner, and the idea of all these books is just to sort of document an aspect of a career or a company. And the best example of that is the program that we're doing in Topps Publishing. And we will be continuing that next year with a bunch of titles, which we'll be able to announce at New York Comic Con. But we just finished a couple of big license deals on the Topps books. So that's the briefest history of who ComicArts is. I want to tell you about some of our recent books. Carol will talk about this next one, which is climate change.
Okay, I meant to bring this book with me because it's almost 500 pages of graphic novel, and darn, I left it in the booth. So imagine this. This is it. This is Climate Change. It's kind of phenomenal by Philippe Scorzoni, a French artist, and he previously had done books on politics and war in Mexico, the Holocaust, mental health issues, and in doing a book about politics, discovered he was talking about global warming. And reached a point where he said, I don't know what global warming is. So I need to investigate this. And it turned into this incredible 5-year journey of creating this graphic novel. And the quote that we like to use about this book is from John Kerry when he said to the United Nations that the truth about climate change is screaming at us, and the science is screaming at us, and we need to pay attention, but not just pay attention, but understand it. So what Philippe has tried to do is break it down, explain the climate, explain the fluctuations in environment that happen and how humans have affected it, and also take a personal look at what we as people in the Western world do with our consumption and our use, what we can do as individuals or collectively, and other power sources, other ways of ameliorating the very real human effect on the planet. He doesn't in any way leave any doubt as to climate change's reality and the human factor in it. He wants to explain why that's so. He wants to explain how it works. He introduced all manner of experts from the IPCC, including the Nobel Prize winners, to help spell it out. So some of it is sort of an interview format. He presents the facts in this very understandable, clear way, and then shows us where we're going. And at one point, he tries to give us a little hope. You know, what can we, the individual person, do about this? What's next? Are we all going to freeze and then burn and then be flooded and have no cows? And kind of gets to the end, and he's talking through his wife. This is constant sounding board through the whole book, and he walks his dog, and he comes back, and he talks with her, and she says, well, you can't end your book on a downer. You can't do that, right? And, you know, he kind of doesn't want to, but I think you should read all 480 pages of this book. It's broken down into sections. It's very accessible. Find out where he goes with it. You'll learn stuff you didn't know. You'll have stuff you did know, explain in a way that you can then present to others. And art is breathtaking. And I've never seen such devotion to hundreds and hundreds of pages of finely detailed art. So if you're just a graphic novel fan and you don't care about this planet because there's some others out there, still read it. It's spectacular.
And now I'd like to bring up Mark Evanier. We have a couple of titles that are coming out this fall. The first of which, Mark. Yeah, you want to read this section? Sorry, make sure that's working. And the first book that Mark and I have done together at Abrams was this Kirby comics book.
I thought one of mine the PowerPoint says number 2, so 2 other books.
Oh. And we'll fix that. Congratulations, Mark. Yay. That's right.
2 already working. Well, I have to leave. I'm sorry. I have to catch a shuttle bus back to the actual comic book convention and do another panel.
You haven't seen, but I have a couple pictures of you and Joe from New York Comic. And this is the cover of your new book, so while you talk about it a little bit, I can scroll through some slides.
Well, as probably some of you know, I was Jack Kirby's assistant for a while, and came to be very involved with Jack. Started to feel like family at times with him, and became a historian of his. Of course, this I met Joe Simon, who was Jack's partner from about 1940 to about 1956 or 7. And they worked together a little bit into 59, and they had one last collaboration in the 70s. And at one point, and one of the things about Joe Simon, he was a wonderful man, wonderful talented man. He saved a lot of stuff, really good at archiving things, which at the time people threw away, including one of the original art of the comics. And he wasn't thinking so much about the value of the original art as selling it someday, as they have since done Arizona auctions. He was thinking about the fact that, gee, maybe we can reprint that someday and make more money off it, which is a perfectly valid reason to keep the material. He kept a lot of his material, and it formed the basis, the core of this book. People, in the Kirby Amulet, the Kirby King comic book that I did, we printed a Fighting American story off the original art. Warts and all, you can see the whiteouts and the states and the erasures and the paste overs. And we printed it rather large. And there seemed to be a demand to see all this other stuff that Joe had in his archives. And we supplemented it with pages from other Kirby collectors and Simon and Kirby collectors around the country. And we have the book of how many pages is this thing?
344.
344 pages of, apart from a few stupid pages where I say stuff. Work was done in Simon and Kirby Studio, and not just by Joe and Jack themselves, but they had a lot of wonderful artists such as Bill Doug Wildly and Joel Lister. And really, the book is self-explanatory to that extent because you just see page after page of things like this. You can see the whiteout on it, you can see the paste over, some paste wasn't falling off, and you see the kind of brownish stain. They used to use a thing called mucilage on the pages, which was a glue that was really good for about an hour. And those are cases where lettering or paste overs has fallen off. Or in this case, they never even put on that color there. This is a page called The Face of Mars, which I believe was inked by Al Williamson. And it's just, you don't do much of a sales piece for a book with Jack Kirby. When the first book came out, the Kirby came out, people came up to me going, well, Mark, you did a great job on that book. You had such wonderful artwork in there. How hard is it to put together a Jack Kirby book with lots of wonderful artwork in it? And this was equally easy because there's so much wonderful stuff there. This is by Doug Wildly. You may know Doug created the Johnny Quest cartoon show. And he was I used to share an office in the Hanna-Barbera in the 70s. And Doug was doing a lot of TV shows. He missed doing comics because comics were all his and TV shows were Sunday night and such. And it's a really neat book. It comes out in October. I hope to get the first copy. And I'll just say one thing here about the book publishing. I invented something I created one that was called Editor's Rule. And I told Neil Gaiman about this. And Neil Gaiman cited it a few times, credited to me. And everybody was referring to it as Gaiman's Law. He didn't intend to, but he usurped this. The rule is when you get a book from the press, they're author, you get a book published, you send the first copy off the presses. Whatever page you open to will have a typo. You'll just screaming at it, you look at it and go, there it is right in front of you on that page. You can't do anything about it. I don't think we have any typos. I'm going to run on a limb and say that because of the fabulous editorial expertise in this company, this book is absolutely typo-free.
The other thing about the book that is really important is that all the stories are complete. Joe wanted this to be a reading book so that we have complete stories, we have unpublished covers, unfinished covers, and finished covers. But you really get a complete experience, and it goes chronologically through his career. This piece on the right.
Yes, these stories. The last collaboration that Joe and Jack did was in the 70s. They were both editors for DC Comics, and most of what Jack wrote and drew himself. At one point, Joe Simon created an idea of a brand new character using the old name Simon and Kirby had used in the 40s, the Sandman, and otherwise the Hartman name had nothing to do with the old strip. And Joe wrote this story, and he had an artist named Jerry Granetti to get going. People at DC went, wait a minute, this isn't right. This isn't clicking. We need Kirby. Put Simon and Kirby together again. So he did one last collaboration. It's one issue of comic. It sold very well. One of the best-selling comics DC had in that period for one issue. And then they took it away from both Joe and Jack, and it went right down the drain. But Jack penciled the cover, and through machinations, I'm not quite sure if Joe got a copy of Jack's pencil cover, and he inked a version of it, which was not used. We had one Jack's regular Frank G. Koya. So the last collaboration ever of Simon and Kirby is in this book. It's the first time I believe this is ever printed. This is the version of the cover that Joe inked over Jack in the 70s, more than 30 years after they first teamed up. And it is the last drawing in the book because the book you couldn't follow that. And it was, this page basically marks the end of the Simon and Kirby collaboration.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I apologize for having to run, but I had 11 more panels.
This book I remember to bring, Sing No Evil, great. It is by JP and KP, JP Ahonen and KP Allaire. They have long, elegant Finnish names, which they have abbreviated for us here. And JP was in the Kazu Kibuishi's Flight Anthology, so he is known here in the States, but now he's stepped off on his own. And he and KP belong to all kinds of heavy metal bands as kids and teenagers and in college, and got to a point when they said, hey, let's start another band. And then JP or KP said, let's just write about it instead. That'll be way easier on us. So it's heavy metal meets evil magic and music, and they have to save the day through all kinds of wonderful music that's going on in this poor, stuttering, dyslexic, hapless, failed frontman for the band Percaros. But this music in his head is trying to tell him something, and it's basically that he has to save the world, as one does. And the band is this great collaboration of a female keyboardist, an old hippie who thinks he's 700 years old, a bear on drums. Nobody knows why. He's just a bear. He's on the drums. It's not explained. It's quite wonderful. And poor Axel, the lead man, who can't sing. And so they bring in a young Turkish immigrant they find in a pizza parlor to sing, and it changes everything. And his voice can channel the magic that Axel hears in his head. And the sound just comes out on the page, bursts off the page to me. I think in the previous slide, I had this timed. And there's, like I said, mystery, magic, monstrous music. Someone is going around this little town in Finland where they're trying to get gigs, and people are disappearing, and groupies appear to be literally being eaten. And only the band Percaros can save the day. But it came to us in Finnish, because JP and KP are Finnish, and it didn't have much of a translation, and I can only understand about 10 words of it, and most of those were English language loan words. But it was so vivid, and the story was so clear, and it was so marvelous, I just knew I had to actually read what this was all about. And, I mean, it's fun, it's great, it's a wonderful universe, which I may be going back to, and I think that our design team knocked it out of the ballpark in doing a beautiful book. And there's bears in it, which I'm kind of obsessed with. I kind of like this book, and I recommend it. It's great.
We have some posters we'll be giving away too at the end.
There's a bear.
There's a bear.
Next up is Warren Commission.
Oh, yes, now I have to do sort of a mental shift here, because Warren Commission, I love for a very different reason. This year, this September, marks the 50th anniversary of the release of the Warren Commission's report on the Kennedy assassination. And the team, or half the team who worked on the 9/11 report, Ernie Colon, the artist, has teamed up with Dan Mishkin and Jerzy Droz, I can mispronounce his name, and they brought together well over 100 years of comics experience to telling us the story of the Warren Commission report. And it's not just about Kennedy, it's not just about the assassination, it's not this dry tale of how they reported on it or tried to figure out what happened, but it really goes into what this report meant, what it meant in the times, and what it meant for our times. I have to admit, when the proposal came in, I looked at it and I said, oh my gosh, Kennedy again. I wasn't born, I only know these iconic images from history books. And then I read it, and not only does he break down the timeline in this beautiful visual language that compares all these conflicting testimonies, but he also breaks down why the Warren Commission report tried so hard to put a final chapter on the Kennedy assassination. They were going to get it done 1 year after the assassination. They were going to say, Oswald did it, we've got the evidence, we're done. Nobody is ever going to talk about this again. This is case closed. And all they did really was open this can of worms, which affects us to this day, affects us now in the 21st century, where we think about conspiracies and political cover-ups, and is the government really telling us everything? And it has its roots in this well-meaning commission, the Warren Commission, who just kind of dropped the ball, but for reasons they thought were doing the right thing. So between presenting the actual timeline of the Kennedy assassination, trying to illuminate who Oswald was as best we can, and then going into the times that surrounded us and how they relate to our own. And I'm very proud to have this on the list, and Ernie Colon is such a great veteran of comics, and I think this is a wonderful follow-up and successor to his book, The 9/11 Report, and it is something very special and amazing.
Kazu doesn't look like Kazu is here, so.
I am Kazu Kibuishi. I was really happy to get to work on the third in the Explorer series. It's a follow-up to a long-running series that Kazu Kibuishi and his co-editorial partners have done in bringing together an anthology of up-and-coming talents, spectacular talents in young adult and middle grade books. So there's, of course, a story by Kazu in it. All the stories have to do with hidden doors, openings, going from one place to the next. And we have Kazu, we have, watch me name everybody's name here. Who's up next? Jason Capo, Jen Wang, the wonderful Faith Erin Hicks, who so delightfully won an Eisner last night. Steve Demeter, that's pronounce his name? Okay. And Yoann Matt, who I absolutely adore, did a little story about secret false doors in the Egyptian pyramids. And then, I think it's Scott Wall. And it's once again, they have this down pat on how to appeal to kids' sensibilities and giving them an entree into graphic novels if they're not familiar with them, giving them something that they'll love. If they already love graphic novels, I promise that no one who reads this is ever going to walk through a threshold again the same way, because what wonderful magical thing is going to do on the other side. This great conglomeration of artists and writers who've done a beautiful job in continuing this series.
All right, and I want to bring up David Lasky for a second. David last year won an Eisner Award for the Carter family, which is there. And he also he did the coloring on this new book, El Defo, which
I'll talk about this C.C. Bell's memoir, and it tells a story from the point of view of a little rabbit, which said C.C. was not. And it's a universal story of isolation in middle school, taken from C.C.'s point of view, who lost her hearing from meningitis when she was about 5, and she had to, going to school and making friends is tough, but going to school and making friends while wearing a bulky phonic ear, such as this one, is not as easy. So she has to learn and deal with this disability, and it just being a challenge it's hard enough being around kids in middle school and now try to do it with phonic ear. And what she finds is that the phonic ear allows her to have this superpower, and what it allows her to do is the teacher wears the microphone, and it's this big bulky thing. And this illustration describes when the teacher goes to the bathroom and CC can hear everything while she sits in class, and she can hear like the teacher is talking about the students in the teacher's lounge, and she realizes that this disability makes her special, and so she escapes into this superhero personality, El Defo, but she, and that helps her deal with kind of just living in this little bubble where nobody really talks to her, but then the kids realize that she has this superpower, and they start not using it, but realizing that CC can be one of them. And it's a nice little French tale. It's the most sincere graphic novel I've read, a memoir graphic novel that I think I've ever read. And the coloring is amazing. Look at it. And the most amazing part is how fast you did this. And how perfect I believe it is.
And you used CC for a long time, right?
Yes, CC and I went to college together in the late 80s. So when she asked me to do this, she's a longtime friend, so it was not just a personal project for her, but for me as a colorist, I was so excited to bring my friend's story into color. And CC in college, I knew she was dead. We were in the So she made fun of the showing it sometimes. This is a very, this is stuff as a friend I didn't even know about, and she's putting it out there very heartfelt, and I enjoy reading it.
And she's a very shy person. So this is pretty forward for her.
I gave an advance copy to a friend who has a 10-year-old daughter, and there's no hearing loss situation in her life, but the friend was excited because her daughter she's 10, and she had a friend who's kind of not a good friend, kind of manipulative, maybe a little mean, and there was a situation like that in the book, and her daughter picked it up and was first intrigued by CC being able to hear her teacher deal with each other. But then sat down and read the whole book, and it's a great story beyond just hearing loss. It's about growing up, those weird early friendships you have before you learn what friendship is. Amazed CC was able to go back and just remember what it was like because I was blocked out.
Yeah, we got wonderful quotes from R.J. Polacco, who did Wonder, and Raina Talwar, who does So we've got great quotes. We have copies of the booth, advanced copies that are signed by CC as well as by David. And it really is one of the best memoir graphic novels that I've ever read. It's really touching and beautiful. It's for all ages. It's definitely appropriate for kids, but adults too. It just gives you a window into what it was like for kids. And I always love finding out things about people that you just sort of a window into somebody's life that you wouldn't know otherwise. But she's very honest, and I think really brave in putting this out there. Thank you, David. So, and then a couple of announce a couple of titles for next spring and next fall, and bring up a couple more people. First, last year we put out a book called How to Fake a Moon Landing, which is a book by Daryl Cunningham about science denial. And I'm a huge fan of Daryl's, and it was a real honor to put out this book, and it got all kinds of attention and awards, and I was really blown away by how reductive his art is and how smart he is at presenting very complex topics. I was asking him what he was working on next, and he sort of wasn't sure. He wanted to do something about the financial crisis. He wanted to do something about, he lives in England, but he sort of wanted to figure out like how this global catastrophe happened. And so that's as much as we knew about what he was going to work on next. And the more research he did, and the more he dug into it, he sort of decided to trace everything, that he could trace everything back to one person, Ayn Rand. So we have The Age of Selfishness, which is Ayn Rand, morality, and the financial crisis. And what he does is he takes the story of Ayn Rand and takes this book into three acts. And the first act is a biography, a straight biography of Ayn Rand, where he doesn't editorialize, he just gives the details of her life. And as he's doing that, and presenting, again, very complex concepts, these are just single panels from the book, but he sort of breaks down her philosophies and things like that, and then talks about some of her disciples, people who were part of her in the circle. One of them is Alan Greenspan. So the second act of this book is about people like Alan Greenspan, people who were part of her inner circle, who were sort of disciples of hers, and then follows that in the sort of, he was the chairman of the Federal Reserve, and the policies that he put in place, which were directly linked, and Daryl, researched everything in his footnotes at the back of the book that sort of explain everything, directly links all this back to Ayn Rand, to the economic collapse, which is the third act of the book, and ties everything together. It's really fascinating. He doesn't editorialize, although it's kind of hard. She's a very polarizing figure. You either like her or don't like her, or hate her, I should say. But I think he presents the facts very fairly, and you can draw your own conclusions. But it's very clear that if you sort of take government out of, and regulation out of things, that corporations, that they may quote people, will not always do the right thing. And we have lots of evidence to support that, corporations, if they're left unchecked and without guidelines or whatever, will not do the right thing. And that's what the graphic novel is about. It's what led to the economic crisis in 2008, and we're still feeling the effects of that.
Just So Happens by Fumio Obata. It's such a lovely and heartfelt book. The plot is fairly straightforward. Yumiko is a young woman who was born in Japan. She lives in London now. She does a gallery show for art. She has a good job. She has a good guy. They love each other. And the Japanese culture that she grew up in seems very far away to her until one day her brother phones and their father's died in an accident. So she has to go straight home. But the question is she going home? Is that home? What is home now? And who is she? What's her identity? She's immersed back in her culture. She's immersed in the rituals of death and also the rituals of life. So there's fish bars and bullet trains and going to stores, but there's also well-meaning undertakers and other rituals and her mother. And again, starting to question, well, my father's gone now, but what do I owe him? Where is my future? The watercolors are beautiful. There's this lush reality as well as this lush symbolism intertwined in the book as she works this out and talks to her friends and her family, her brother, her sister-in-law, dealing with the absurdities that she's now facing. Like his character, Yumiko Fumio Obata, who was born in Tokyo, moved to London, spent a lot of time in Europe, did a residency in Amulet in France. But the story, it really affects me on the emotional level, on the family level. It might affect you because you're fascinated by being between two cultures or what identity really means. But it goes beyond just being, one city and another, or a person between identities. It deals really both gently and powerfully with grief, with who you are, with this pressure not to disappoint your parents even after they're gone. And you may not sum it up with a bow at the end, but with a real, true look at what's going on within this person as she walks this line between culture, life, death, family, and where she's going. It's a special book, and I'm very glad, again, it's another one I'm so glad to have on this list. Okay, again, I have to do this whiplash of mood change because there's Rutabaga. And this is on our Amulet list because it's for kids. It is a middle grade book by Mr. Colossal. That's his name. Well, that's his name online, and that's his name on this book. And basically, you take several delicious adventures, mix in some dragons and some monsters and some haunted squash and dice up some danger. And as Rutabaga, the adventure chef, says, let's get cooking. This is the first book in a brand new series, and we're in such a foodie moment. It seems appropriate to think, if there are wyverns and dragons and dragon eggs and haunted mushrooms, where are the recipes for all these things? What are people eating on their adventures? So for any kid who's looked at the food on the table and said, Mom, I don't know what the heck this is, or won't eat in the classroom or in the school lunchroom, and this is the book for them. And he makes going out and trying new things and finding new ingredients like super heroic, and maybe a little tweety guy with a great big head that's an easy target for the monsters to hit, but darn it, he's going to go out there and he's going to find whatever he can, some new ingredient that he can chop up and use. So I think that his escapades are great for kids who are interested in food. They're a little bit too young for a book like Relish, but there's just the right amount of fun for the 8-year-olds, but a heaping dash of fantasy for the older kids. And Eric Colossal started this as a webcomic, so fans of this comic now get it in full color with all kinds of new extra stuff, including recipes at the end that kids can try themselves. And with appropriate grown-up supervision, but it's just a lot easier to do peanut butter puffs or cinnamon pep potion than to hunt down a haunted squash or to beat a dragon. So we made it a little bit easier for the readers at the end. And like I said, it's the first in a new series, and I'm looking forward to more grisly gastronomic moments from Rutabaga.
Okay, I'd like to bring up Chip Kidd to talk about our next title, which we've been working on for quite a bit. So if you come up there, we'll head to that here.
I apologize for the quality,
Oh,
low quality there of these images. So Charlie and I just spent an extraordinary week in Santa Rosa, California. As some of you may not know, in the fall of 2001, I published a book on the art of Charles and Schultz, which I had researched. The summer of 2000, right after, it was the summer after he died, and at the behest of his widow and his family, I went with photographer Jeff Spear to his studio so we didn't really know what we were doing, what we were going to find. And then we did this book. And in the meantime, in 2003, I believe, the Charles Schultz Museum was in Santa Rosa. And Charlie had been talking to me for several years about really going back. And because the museum had acquired all this extraordinary stuff, to do another book based on what's there. And so after a lot of back and forth and figuring out how exactly we were going to do this, last week we went and we went through the entire archive and we realized and found a lot of incredible stuff that had not been previously published or seen, and then a lot of stuff that you think you've seen but will be seeing really, really for the first time. Is there any way to tilt the house lights here? So we actually already have a cover and the title, and this is it.
And the type on the left is going to be on the spine.
So, and really this is about his whole method of distillation, of distilling human feelings and human frailties and human joys and love and hate and down into, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines that in and of themselves would mean nothing, but when he put them together in this way that he did, he created an entire emotional universe, an emotional landscape. And we were in the car going from where we were staying to the museum, and Charlie started talking about an interview with Schultz where he remembered that Schultz had said that cartooning, at least for him, was distilling everything down into its basic essence of what it is, and using only what's necessary to get your point across and to tell your story. And it was one of these sort of, Bazinga moments where, well, then that should be the way, only what's necessary. So we're tremendously excited about it. Jeff Kinney is going to do an introduction, and some other people are probably going to write, I'm not sure who, but it's going to be about the trajectory of the art. Everything in it really is either original art. There's not going to be the focus on the printed strips that I put in the last book. And there's also going to be very, very little overlap from the last book, almost none. This was a painting that Schultz had done in the hot drink there, just for a benefit. And this was Jeff shooting it, and then, well, you'll see the actual painting, but and just, we just got full access to all of the originals, tons of pre-peanuts, little folks there, and there's a couple of, sorry about that, there's a couple of strips that segue, that are the missing links between little folks and when Peanuts started, that he had wanted published for anybody to see. And it goes right up through to the end, when his, that's the page. Why he didn't do more of this, I can only begin to imagine. This was pretty much the only example of that we really found. And it takes you up through the last days of the strip, and he wouldn't save much for himself. He gave stuff away, or did things for other people as presents. This is a drawing of Beethoven that he did on some kid's sweatshirt in the 80s. The last couple of years, he would work out his ideas of yellow legal secretary, and various assistants would wait for him to leave and go from the studio and then retrieve all of the bunched up ripped up pieces of legal pad and save them.
It would iron
and iron them and smooth them out. And so towards the end, we can show also false starts. He would always start with the lettering, and they would always start drawing the last panel, because he felt that if he could get the end of the gag right, then the rest of it would follow through and work. And a lot of times he didn't think it was working, but a lot of those working scripts were also saved. So we're tremendously. Oh, and this was a header for a strip from the 50s about playing checkers, and just that on the left, I mean, that looks to me like something out of Raw magazine in the late 80s. It's just so interesting and strange and not like normally what you would see in visuals. So that's the book. We're really excited about it, and it's going to be 9 by 12 horizontal, and we're thinking 300.
So it's been a real honor. This has always been one of the books that I've wanted. Thank you, Eternal. This has been one of the books that I've wanted to do forever. And when Chip did his first Peanuts book, it's like the best book, and it's the book that if you're a Peanuts fan, there could be no other. And then I just kept thinking, what if we focused on what we do at Abrams and focus on him as an artist? We don't get into all that. We focus on his art, and it's been extraordinary working with Chip, but also with Jeff Spear, the photographer, who has taken amazing photographs. And you see that this, the level of detail that his lens gets, and what we'll be able to bring out into the work will be really staggering. So that'll be out next July for Comic-Con. We'll have copies, and it'll come out officially in September, and then the Peanuts movie will come out in November. So next year will be the 65th anniversary of Peanuts, and we're really honored to celebrate it. So thank you. So a couple more titles, and then we'll wrap up with one more special guest. While Chad is getting that ready, I'll begin by talking. We published the book 2 years ago called My Friend Dahmer by Durf Backdurf, and really honored to announce and present that we're going to be doing his next book, which is called Trashed. And Trashed was something that he had dabbled in a little while ago, about maybe 15 years ago, did a little indie comic, and he's now expanded it and broken it out to a full-length graphic novel where he sort of fills in what happens to garbage, what happens to the environment, and what it's like to be a garbage man. And it's done in a way that only Durf could. This is the story after Dahmer, after Durf graduated, after he and his friends that you see in My Friend Dahmer all graduated. Durf and his friend Mike from the book became garbage men for 2 years, and this follows that trajectory of their time. And because they're adolescents, because they're kids, there's all the usual kind of hijinks and disgusting stuff that happens when you're, unfortunately, as he says, have the crap job of all crap jobs. He also has nonfiction pages like this where he tells about the history of garbage and how our infrastructure and everything is set up. He talks about what happens to the garbage, where it gets shipped. you know, the very strange trades that are made between states to take other states' garbage and dispose of them, and also just the economic and sort of you know, sort of challenge of disposing of all that and where things are going. It's really a remarkable work. He's really an amazing researcher. I think the thing that Jerv does that I think was brought about in My Friend Dahmer is that he's a journalist, and he really researches his subjects and gets into detail and sort of examines all that. So this is really wonderful. We're really excited to have that on the list. Just wanted to announce a couple of very quick things. We have next fall we'll have Barry Roach's latest third installment of Hereville. We also announced this through the press a couple of months ago, but we were working with John Leguizamo on, I don't know if anybody saw on HBO Ghetto Clown, but we'll be doing a graphic novel with Krista Cesaro, and you know, it'll be an adaptation of his HBO special, which was a Broadway special. These are some rough pencils. It's all coming in as we speak, but John's been absolutely wonderful working with him and pulling this together. And we're really excited to have, you know, John on our list, and we'll have copies for samplers for next year, and John promises to be out at, here in San Diego Comic-Con to promote the book as well. He's an old friend. We go way back, so it's through circumstances that had nothing to do with me. But another editor at Abrams called David Cashin, the manuscript came in, and David asked me if I knew, you know, John Leguizamo, and I said not only did I know, you know, his work, but I also knew him. And we had a great meeting, and really honored to have John part of the list. And then last but not least, I want to bring up Eddie Pittman. We haven't announced this anywhere, but Eddie, come on up. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I stuck Eddie in the worst spot there, like, you know, a couple of Anybody familiar with the webcomic Red's Planet? And that's by Eddie Pittman here. And we just recently signed up 3 original graphic novels based on that are basically compiling his Red's Planet webcomic. These will be on the Amulet list, which is our kids' graphic novel in print. And it'll be all the way down at the end. Eddie and I met recently. There was the National Cartoonist Society has their annual Reuben Awards, which is named after Rube Goldberg, and every year it's in a different city. This past Memorial Day weekend, it was here in San Diego, and one of the special guests was Eddie Pittman. And I went to his panel and saw his presentation on Red's Planet, and at the end of it, introduced myself, and we took it from there.
So we have this a little backwards here, so I'll show you a little bit of the work of Red's Planet. It's a webcomic I've been doing for about 5 years now. I think of it as an animated cartoon in comic form. I have background in animation, I went to feature film too. Recently I worked on the Disney TV show Phineas and Ferb. So a lot of the work I do is very cinematic. I think in film terms, so that's one thing I hear a lot. So, we get to a movie here. We just play it. Great. So, Red's Planet is the story of Red, a 10-year-old spunky Earth girl who struggles with her existence in foster care. And by the way, she doesn't like to be called Red. And one night she finds herself abducted mistakenly by a UFO. And soon she's whisked across the galaxy into a fantastic world of spaceships and aliens and something like nothing she'd ever seen. And through a series of events, she is marooned on a deserted planet with a group of misfit aliens. and finds herself in a contest of wills with the planet's grumpy custodian. And Red begins to realize that living with these aliens isn't much different from living with her foster parents. And so in that nutshell, that's what's
Cool. So I wish we had a little more time, but I want to thank Eddie and Chip and David and Mark Evanier for coming, Carol and Chip. You know, unless they kick us out, we have time for questions, but I don't know if we don't, she's saying no. We're at booth 1216, and a lot of the books that we have, Signal Evil and Climate Change, and all those are available at the ComicArts booth. We have ComicArts brochures, free posters, lanyards for ComicArts if anybody wants to walk around, instead of, you know, plugging that diversion, plug Abrams ComicArts. Thank you so much for coming, we really appreciate it.